Moving into my 40s has absolutely been eye-opening. I now encounter new challenges that I had never experienced before with my overall health. In addition to my already ongoing digestion issues, I was now dealing with imbalanced hormones, sleepless nights, brain fog, and extreme, very random bloating. I had zero clue that all of these symptoms could actually be tied together and that there was a product that already existed that could greatly relieve these symptoms. This is why you need to know about Hormone Harmony, Happy Mammoth's most loved and top-selling supplement. Hormone Harmony's ingredients have been shown to support hormonal balance, relieve symptoms of menopause, support cortisol, estrogen, and progesterone levels, promote healthy weight loss, and curb carb cravings, improve sleep quality, help with irritability, enhances the body's adaptation to stress, and supports mental function. I also love that Happy Mammoth supplements are made with the most potent natural ingredients from all over the world, combined with the most effective dose for maximum results. It is no wonder that in just under 6 years, Happy Mammoth has over 1 million satisfied customers and 25,000 positive reviews that also include many personal transformational stories. So what are you waiting for? For a limited time, you can get 15% off your entire first order at happymammoth.com with the code EWU at checkout. That's happymammoth.com with the code EWU. In September of 2024, I received a text message from Amber asking me if I knew why our TikTok and podcast downloads had suddenly and dramatically spiked. We both were under the impression that neither of us had posted any new content, so to see such a reaction and views was not making any sense. This is when Detective Amalu, aka Amber, decides to do some digging. And it wasn't before long that I heard a ping on my phone and saw that Amber had sent me a TikTok video posted by Mama Tot. Let's take a listen.
Okay, let's get into it. You have a wife over here, Miss Gordy, right? And then you have a husband over here. Let's call him Ricky, okay? Now, back to Miss Gordy. Now, for about 26 years, Miss Gordy, she was married to the love of her life. The love of her life, honey. And unfortunately, the love of her life, Mr. Gordy, lost his battle with cancer. A month later, sadly, Miss Gordy loses her mama. Now, I do believe that was about 6 years ago. Okay? Fast forward. Now, Miss Gordy meets Ricky. Okay? Now, Ricky seems to be a dream come true. All right? Nice man, acted like he cared about her. She thought, okay, well, I've lost my first husband, the love of my life. It's difficult, very difficult, and I don't want to be alone for the rest of my life. And I know that, my husband would want me to find happiness, and I think I have. So she thought. Now, she's been married to old Ricky for a year and a half. You remember that now. Now, for me, I've never seen Miss Gordy a day in my life till just a few days ago. There comes a video up on my FYP, and it starts off with, hey, what do you do after your husband of a year and a half? You come home from work, and everything is gone, including the money and the retirement, all of it. You take off to Disney World. Huh? The retirement? Huh? The retirement. All right. Now, Ricky over here seems to be some kind of paranormal activity person. Of course, I don't think he's a good one, because if he was, he wouldn't have to steal from his wife, Miss Gordy. Ricky. Apparently, he done did this same thing to other women. Now, I don't know how many yet. You know what? He's going to run out that money at some point in time, right? And you know what happens when a con artist runs out of money? They find their next victim. Anyway, so Miss Gordy says, y'all keep the word going now, because ain't no telling who he's going to try to get next. And I'll see what I need to do about my stuff. Lord knows I don't know. And somebody told her to reach out to Undercover Wives podcast or something. Excuse me, what is that? Because I'm intrigued, okay? Like, somebody tell me about it, all right? Somebody, Undercover Wives podcast. We need to go look it up. Hold on. Oh, my Lord, it's a thing. Ex-Wives Undercover, a podcast sharing toxic love stories told by women who survived them. Why am I just finding this? This is the snake hole of all snake holes. Right here. We got some playlist. Good night. Thank the good Lord I checked the comment section. I'd never heard about that. Miss Gordy, We're going to keep up with your story, okay? Because it certainly needs to be heard. Apparently, the Ex-Wives Undercover, that's the whole motto. Thank y'all!
Now, after watching the video clip, it all made sense. Mama Tot had tagged Ex-Wives Undercover in her TikTok video asking us to help Miss Gordy, so that's exactly what we did. And within a few days, I reached out to Lori and I realized that she was actually still in the midst of uncovering even more information on who the man she married really was. Amber and I immediately knew that we had to help Lori warn other women about Richard Ruland.
Welcome to Ex-Wives Undercover.
Liars, cheaters, and love cons.
I'm Amber.
And I'm Athena.
First we told our story, and now we're sharing all of your craziest and most heart-wrenching stories of love gone wrong. Sometimes we laugh.
And sometimes we cry.
But more importantly,
we stand together. All right, girl. You ready to do this?
Let's do it.
The views, information, or opinions expressed on our show by our guests are solely the views of those individuals involved and by no means represent absolute facts. Opinions expressed by the host and guests may change at any time. Our podcast and YouTube show may at times cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to suicide, abuse, violence. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. Season 6, Episode 1 of Lori's story, Ghosted.
I was married to Paul for 27 years. We met in our church orchestra, fell in love immediately. He played trumpet and I played flute, and he would sit behind me and he would say, I'm going to marry a flute player. And I was actually dating someone else at the time, and ended up breaking it off with that fella, and started going out with my Paul. And we ended up being married for 27 years. We have 3 amazing boys together. Paul got sick with light chain amyloidosis. It's a very rare blood cancer for which there is no cure. He fought the light chain amyloidosis for about 6 years. I was his sole caregiver, and we were trying to raise our boys during that time. He still went to work every day. He earned the nickname Superman during that time. He finally earned his wings October 23rd of 2018. And I have missed him dearly, and I did not do well after he died. I stopped eating. I lost a lot of weight. I stopped taking phone calls. My tribe would come to my door and I would not answer the door. So the following year, I decided, you know what, I'm going to have to pick my feet up and move forward. One of the last things Paul had said to me was that when I go, I need you to move on. I need you to find somebody else. And I remember specifically telling him he had lost his dang mind, that wasn't going to happen. But I decided to kind of step out and start dating. I did meet one fella, and we actually dated for a while. We both had a lot of growing up to do, though, and so I moved out and got my own place. And then we had been broken up for a while when I met Richard.
Tell us about first seeing his pictures. What did he describe himself in his profile, and what attracted you to him?
Well, you know, it's really funny because being a music lover, his title under his photo was Why Not Me? And I immediately recognized that song. And so I didn't even really look at his pictures. I just messaged back and said, hey, I think there's a country song in that. I've never been one to go necessarily for what someone looks like. I go more for personality. I look for depth of character. Apparently my character meter was off with this one. He immediately responded. And we just started talking. He was funny. I started looking through his pictures. Yeah, he's a big guy. You couldn't really tell, anything about teeth in the pictures. But I'm like, I don't really care that he's a big guy. I'm a fluffy girl. So what? No one cares. And then I noticed he had like the Ghost Adventures picture pinned up. And I was like, so what's up with this whole Ghost Adventures thing? Are you into the paranormal? And he was like, well, I was actually on Ghost Adventures. And so that became a talking point.
In honor of Dalton Ghost Tour Summer 2021 season, which is currently underway. So I invited Richard Ruland and Katie Turner on to talk about their podcast and whatever else ghostly we get into. Richard Ruland is a former police officer from New York who migrated south. He's a staple in the paranormal community, having appeared on My Ghost Story, Aftershocks with Zach Bagans, and more. He's a serious paranormal investigator with a suitcase full of ghost-busting equipment, and he is the founder of the Haunted Travelers.
I had won tickets to a comedy show in Chattanooga at the Comedy Catch. And Logan was living in Alabama at the time, going to school. And he told me he had come home to go. And he was like, you know what, Mom, you should take him. Take Richard. And I was like, are you sure, buddy? You came? He's like, yeah, Mom, I'd much rather you take Richard. I really don't want to go. He said, and you guys seem to have hit it off. And so I asked him, and he absolutely wanted to meet me. And he told me he actually got there like an hour early because he was so excited. I know when I got there, he was standing outside waiting. Big, tall guy, like 6'4". Of course, big fella, over 300 pounds, like 350, 375 maybe. And I remember when I walked up, he just gave me the biggest hug, and just the biggest bear hug. And I felt like I was home. It filled one of those bubbles that I had been missing from losing Paul. I had not been hugged like that in a very long time.
Lori and Richard would have their second date during a ghost tour that Richard was actually hosting at the Wright Hotel in Chatsworth, Georgia. Lori then would get to meet his team from Haunted Travelers and a few of the friends. And by the end of that date, she thought, hey, I have met a really good man.
Does he at that point really make you a believer in him, of his abilities?
He absolutely did. So, I do believe in the paranormal. I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there. I absolutely believe that exists. I grew up in a house that stood through the Civil War in Manassas, Virginia. And it was a Civil War Confederate hospital. So I do have some abilities. And my mama always said that I was fae, or that I have second sight. I tend to know things are going to happen sometimes before they happen. I did not, however, see this one coming because I chose to ignore the red flags. So, yeah, so our second date, and please know, I did do research on Richard. Like, he had been doing the Dalton ghost tours.
Right. I saw
He
that.
had been their guest. So I had looked him up on Google.
He looks very legit. Very legit.
Right. He appears very legitimate. He told me at the time that he managed the two properties. One was the Wright Hotel, and the other one was the Hamilton House in Dalton, Georgia. He told me he was managing those properties. No, he was not. He was running ghost tours there for the historical societies. The historical societies manage those properties. I didn't know any better, but our second date, he takes me to the Wright Hotel. I meet his investigation team. One of them used to be a prosecutor in Atlanta. One of them is a hairdresser, and that would be the ones who are now harboring him.
Yeah, well, for such like a talented psychic medium, I can guarantee he's not seeing this coming, is he? Oh, maybe. If he's watching,
stalking me, so
yeah,
he
is.
knows.
So he knows, but
He knows.
Hi, Richard. What else did you find out? Did you find any wives or girlfriends or anything? Kids?
I specifically asked him if he had children, and he told me that he was never able to have biological children, that he wasn't physically able. So yeah, no, I had no knowledge of any children.
But ex-wives, yes. You knew he was married maybe
I
once?
knew he had been married. He told me he had been married twice.
Okay.
And I knew of one ex-girlfriend before me.
He seems believable.
It does seem very believable. So, the evening starts out. He's very charismatic. That's one thing you guys need to know. He has the gift of gab, and he's very charismatic. He comes across as very intelligent when he's speaking. Written communication, not so much. When he's speaking, though, you think, okay, he knows what he's talking about. Several of the guests were repeat guests. His tours always sold out. And so the tour gets started. We go upstairs. We're sitting on this couch, and he asks if there's any spirits that want to communicate to knock on the wall behind us. And the couch that I was sitting on got knocked on so hard that it shook. It shook. And I remember, I swung around and looked at him. I was like, what was that? And he just started laughing.
What is it like to be psychic? What does that feel like? We all have intuition. Is that kind of what it is?
It's a blessing and a curse. It is both. It is nothing you can really turn off. And as it's happened to me several times on your tours, I'm just strolling along with a guest, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a deceitant would step forward and try to have me deliver this message. And it's hard for a psychic medium because you have to deliver the message. There's no, yeah, I can put it off, because it'll drive you crazy, literally.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to deliver it. Thing is, you've got all these people gathered together, as happens with your tours, and you just pick out who belongs to who, and it's just a lot of work. You just can't turn it off. You can't get a respite from it. So you got to find your own way to kind of tone it down a little bit, maybe, and then take your time to have your me time. I talked about it a lot on the show, and Katie agrees. I'll go find a lake. I'll go find a stream. I'll go find somewhere where there's a very high vibration level of energy, and I'll sit there and I'll chill out. But there's no way to hide from it.
And so everything went really well that night. It all seemed very believable. We caught EVPs. So I'm not saying that everything that he did was fake at all, because there were some very believable things. So yeah, hook, line, and sinker. Reel me in. He had me.
Richard and Lori quickly got to know the ins and outs of each other's lives, careers, families, and friends.
So he was in merchant card sales or merchant services. So basically he went into businesses and sold them the credit card processing programs and provided them with the machine, and he got commission only. And so when I first met him, that's the type of work that he was doing.
See, were you a couple right away? Were you just like, oh my God, I'm so into you? And then right into exclusively dating in those next few weeks?
He immediately started sending me love songs like You Are the Reason and different things, and telling me he just really felt connected to me. He invited me to his place. He cooked for me. I invited him to come over to my house, and we hung out, ate, watched movies. And so we became a couple pretty quickly. One of our dates for Valentine's Day, he actually rented out, or told me that he rented it out, the Hamilton house there in Dalton. Another couple from the Haunted Travelers team actually went on this date with us, and we spent Valentine's night investigating this haunted attraction.
Now let's hear what Lori's son Logan had to say about Richard.
When I first met him, he came across as a pretty humble, chill guy. That's really the only way I can think to explain it. I thought it was a bit sudden. I was a little weary of him, but it wasn't like a, no, don't do this.
We did a family dinner at a restaurant in Fort Payne, Alabama, so that Richard could meet all of the children at once. And they really liked him. My youngest, when we got in the car that night, I said, what did you think? And he said, he's so much like Dad. That's what really makes me think he had looked into us and looked into Paul, looked into the family, was Logan's comment that Richard was so much like his dad. And I said, you know what, buddy, you're right. I agree with you, because I did at that time, or at least I thought I saw a lot of the qualities that Paul had. He opened doors for me, even the car doors. He told me I was beautiful every other breath. He would bring me flowers for no reason, chocolates for no reason, just little treats, a piece of cheesecake or a piece of chocolate cake. Give me hugs, just all the things that now I realize were love bombing, that I didn't realize at the time that's what was happening. I was missing Paul so much, and I had all of those bubbles that needed to be filled, and no one had completely filled those bubbles since Paul left. And Richard was doing that.
Here is what Logan had to say.
It was a general vibe. It was how he treated my mom at the start.
And so did you tell her, like, hey, this guy kind of reminds me of Dad, and I'm happy?
Yeah, originally I did, and I liked him. I really did. I didn't think he would ever do something like this.
He came over one day and he said, I think we should just go ahead and move in together. We could save a lot of money. And I'm like, he goes, well, I'm being thrown out. I said, what do you mean you're being thrown out? They can't do that. He said, well, the landlord, they're selling the duplex that I live in. He said, so I've got 2 weeks. I have to be out. I was like, I don't know that my landlord's going to be okay with that. I was living in a little industrial house in the middle of another co-teacher's farm. Literally lived in the pasture with her cows and her bulls. And he was like, I don't think she'll have a problem with it. I don't have anywhere else to go. And so I was like, okay, fine. I had messaged my landlord and let her know. She didn't really have much to say. And he shows up at my house one afternoon in the car that he had at the time. And he had a ripped up orange and white comforter. He had a copper bottom skillet. He had an electric griddle, his paranormal equipment, a suitcase, a duffel bag, and a My Pillow. That should have clued me in that something wasn't right, because I had been to his place and it was fully furnished. It was a nice place. By the end of February, maybe, he was living with me. And of course, when he moved in, y'all, it was the whole, I'll pay all the bills. Rent there was like under $500 a month. He was like, I'll pay all the bills. You can use your money on what you want to use your money on. If you don't want to work, you don't even have to work.
So, of course, we are wondering, what are Lori's friends and family members, especially her sons, thinking about the two moving in together so quickly? Well, this is what Logan had to say.
Way too soon. If I can recall, it was maybe 3 or 4 months. And that's mind-boggling to me. And I did protest. But at the end of the day, I did tell her, if this is what makes you happy and you are confident in this decision, then do it. You're my mother. I can't exactly tell you what to do.
Genetics can be beautiful. Maybe you got your mom's eyes or her great skin, but genetics can also be a nightmare. We've all done it, right? Complain about the inherited belly or the love handles. Well, don't let genetics be the thing that holds you back from getting the body you deserve. You need to check out Permanent Solutions by Sono Bello. I'm not going to lie, my best friend actually used Sono Bello after she had a baby, and let me tell you, her results were incredible. Our friends at Sono Bello are offering you the best deal. You are now included in their winter savings event, but appointments are limited, so please get on it. Sono Bello doctors are masters in micro laser fat removal, which is a brilliant technique that removes stubborn fat permanently. So wherever you have problem areas like your tummy, love handles, thighs, arms, it's gone in just one comfortable visit. So eating healthy and workouts are great. Keep doing that. But if you want to lose that stubborn fat in one visit, check out Sono Bello. Save big during their winter savings event. Schedule your free consultation now at sonobello.com/EWU. That's sonobello.com/EWU.
I met his stepchildren. We went to dinner with them, and he kept telling me he didn't really have a great relationship with them, that when he lived there in Saudi Daisy, they didn't come to see him much. Of course, then I made that my new goal, was to try to help him rebuild those relationships. And of course, he blamed it on one of the previous ex-girlfriends, said they weren't welcome when he lived with her and these types of things, and that she and her children were crazy. And so I was trying to help rebuild those relationships. So I didn't really see any red flags there. They were cordial. They seemed okay with him. When I went on the paranormal investigation, I met his friends that were on his team there. And then I also went to South Carolina and met his great niece, Danielle, for her baby shower. And I met his sister there, and his sister's husband, and his ex-sister-in-law. They were all great. And since all of this has come out, they all said that they thought that I had been really good for him, and that they didn't say anything to me because they thought that he had changed. They thought that I had actually turned him around because we looked so happy together, and he seemed on social media to be doing so very well.
Yeah, wishful thinking, but nope. Unfortunately, I wish that was the case, but
Right?
as we all know, we can't change somebody, especially at this age. It's pretty much impossible.
After 6 months of prep and right on par with Richard's typical routine, he was ready to take things to the next level and seal the deal with Lori.
And then when he proposed to me, I told him that he had to ask the boys' permission, that I wouldn't marry him unless my boys gave their blessing.
You are psychic. Did you know we were going to ask you that next?
I did.
I know Athena gave me the nod, and I was like, I was like, okay, she's gonna do it.
I was like, she is the real deal.
She knows.
Sorry.
It's hilarious.
Okay,
So
I'll
yeah,
be quiet.
he actually went to my son, and not only did Caleb give his blessing, but he sent him home with a shotgun, just to borrow. which Richard was just, well, I guess I am part of the family now, and really played that up big because Caleb had loaned him a shotgun. And then, like, my oldest, Devin, he gave him his blessing, welcomed him to the family. Devin really liked him, and the boys wanted me to be happy. Logan, however, did not give his blessing.
He proposed 6 months in, and I threw a flag on the play. I was the only one to throw a flag on the play, but I threw the flag because it needed to be thrown. It was mainly just that length of time. In my opinion, you cannot get to know someone in 6 months at the depth that you're willing to say, yes, I will spend the rest of my life with you.
So I was at work one afternoon. It was cold, it was rainy, and I get a text from him asking me, did I want to go somewhere that evening? And I'm like, no, I'm tired. It's cold. I want to go to bed. I've been working all day. And he said, well, let's go somewhere with some water. And, I just kept, no, I want to come home and I want to go to bed. I later found out he had actually called my friend Dee and had asked her how he should propose. So she knew it was coming. She didn't tip me off. I go ahead and come home, and we're just kind of laying on the bed. And he gets up and he comes around to my side of the bed, and he gets down on the floor. And I remember thinking, what are you doing? You're being weird. Like, did you drop something? And then, so, he does this whole formal proposal about how he loves me and he's never met anybody like me before. And if he can't make it work with me, he'll never be able to make it work with anybody else. He proposes. And the ring, beautiful. I did hesitate. And I thought, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can betray Paul. Because to me, that was an ultimate betrayal, even though Paul had told me to move on. But then I agree. I think about it a minute, and then I'm like, yes, I'll marry you. We had already eaten dinner, and then we went to Cheesecake Factory to celebrate, and they did a whole a cheesecake with, a congratulations and candles, and we had pot stickers, just did the little appetizer thing, and celebrated our engagement in Chattanooga. We put out pictures on social media, and so that was kind of how that went down.
In the few months leading up to the proposal, and a few months after, Lori started to see a few red flags. But like most of us, she kept optimistic and she continued believing in the man that she loved.
As soon as he moved in, he started not being able to cover the rent. It was always that he was changing banks. And when I would say, why do you keep changing processing houses or banks for this credit card processing? And it was always, well, I got a better deal, or they're not paying me right, or you just don't understand the business. And he's right. I didn't understand that business. And so I had kind of seen those red flags. And then he did propose right away, and he wanted to get married right away. But I kept pushing it back and saying, I'm not ready to get married yet. I need a little bit of time. We need to push it back. We need to push it back. And so I was trying to push it back to June of that next year. And then we ended up getting married in February instead. My aunt, my dear sweet aunt, who has been one of my biggest supporters, I remember her specifically asking me, what's his hurry? What's his agenda? But I was in love. I didn't want to hear it. And she did not trust him right off the bat. And then even my tribe, my girlfriends, they were like, well, he seems nice, but what's his rush, And one of my girls, Valerie, the one that was in the Goodbye Earl photo shoot, she would keep telling me, baby, people will tell you who they are if you just listen. And clearly I wasn't listening. We got our own place there in Trenton, Georgia.
Okay.
And we rented a trailer up on the mountain, up on Sand Mountain. And that's when the job losses started happening more frequently. And he was going longer periods of time without any income. And I was having to cover more and more of the bills. When we got that place, though, he had been unemployed, and I was panicking because I didn't know how we were going to be able to afford to move. And the landlord had said, you know what? I don't trust him, and y'all got to go. She's like, you moved him in here. He's been here long enough. I think y'all probably just need to go ahead and move out. Mm-hmm. And she had already rented the place out. So we go ahead, and he's like, don't worry. I will get enough deals. I'll get the money. And what I believe to be happening, I do not have the proof in black and white. I just know what he said. What I believe to be happening is I believe he was reselling the same customers and violating non-compete, because I was in the grocery store there in Trenton when the Dade County officer called my cell phone, because they all knew me, and said, hey, is Richard with you? And absolutely. He said, meet me out in the parking lot. I have a little something for Richard. And he served him with a civil lawsuit from a company out of Florida. I do not remember that company's name. And they were suing him for violation of non-compete, where he had been working and reselling customers that he wasn't supposed to be reselling. But when he did that, he magically came up with enough money to cover bills, to move us into a new place. And even after that, like, he would get a job, he would lose the job. He might keep it for a month, he might keep it for 6 weeks. That was one of the reasons I kept pushing, like, the wedding back, because he wasn't holding jobs. And to me, that was a huge red flag.
Despite Lori's own intuition, she decided to move forward and still married Richard.
We talked about getting married on the cruise ship, which was also extremely expensive. And so we decided we would get married at the state park in front of the waterfall. Parking fee was all that required. Pay the minister. My boys, my daughter-in-laws, and my grandbaby was there. And we had invited his children, and they did surprise him and show up for the wedding. And then my friend Valerie was there, and her son. And she said, I should have spoken up when he asked if anyone objected. I should have said yes. She said, girl, I should have been a better friend. I told her it wouldn't have mattered. I would not have listened anyway, because I was in love. So, but she's a hoot. And so from there, it was so cold that day, guys. It was February 17th, blue cold. And so we left there, and we went to a restaurant in Lookout Valley down there to the Logan's Roadhouse. And we just all ate together. Everybody paid for their own meals. And we took some pictures in there. So we really didn't do a reception. We didn't do a wedding cake. And from there, we left and drove up to Pigeon Forge and spent, the weekend in Pigeon Forge for a pre-honeymoon prior to the cruise that was supposed to happen in June. He had been out of work for about 6 or 8 weeks when he was offered the job in Tampa, Florida. So the move to Tampa was an absolute nightmare. LaVue actually paid all of the moving expenses. Richard did make the phone calls and find a moving company, but I had to get everything packed. They had him begin work there the last week or 2 of June. I think it was the last week. And so I stayed behind. I had to go in and pack my classroom. I had to empty my storage unit that I had. There was a storage unit behind the trailer we were living in that had to be emptied. Plus everything in the house had to be packed. And the whole place had to be cleaned, and he had to go ahead and move. So we had found a house there, went ahead and rented it. He had to rent a bed. I had sent 1 plate, 1 cup, trying to get him situated. I agreed to the move in Tampa and actually encouraged it. The money was great. It was over $100,000 a year for him. He told me, you don't have to teach, you don't have to work. And I said, no, I didn't trust him enough to not work. And I went ahead and applied, got a teaching job in the Tampa area because something just wasn't right. You get that feeling that says something's not kosher. It's that still small voice, that gut instinct. And I'm like, I don't know that he's going to keep this job. We're going to move. But I remember telling him, if we take this job, you cannot get fired. You have to keep this job. Then I started work the very next day, and I spend the next couple weeks trying to unpack the house. He's going to work every day. Things seem to be going well. He tells me they call him King Richard at this company called LaVue because he's doing so well as their sales manager, and he's hiring all these people, and he's doing this belief training program that he says he wrote. I don't know if he wrote it or not. He says he did. We make it through June, we make it through July, we make it through August. We had booked and paid for a Disney trip. I was going to get to go with my grandbaby for the first time. And so we were living there. It made sense. We were still staying on property because it was an hour and a half drive to Orlando from Tampa. We get up the morning that we're going to leave the next day. The hurricane's been going on, and his pay didn't go in. I pull up the bank, and there was no pay from LaVue. And I was like, babe, you didn't get paid. He's like, what? he's totally shocked. I'm like, you didn't get paid. Before that, y'all, he'd been using a lot of PTO time, which I thought was weird because he was still in his initial 90 days. He's like, no, they say I need to use it. I've got to use it. I don't want to lose it kind of thing. And I'm like, are you in probationary period? Like, that didn't make sense either. But, he always had a great story and he would make it make sense. He's like, let me call them. And he says, they're closed, hurricane. I'm like, well, maybe it didn't go in because a lot of the banks in the area were closed. Okay, that makes sense. We're going to have to watch what we spend at Disney. We go ahead and we go to Disney for the weekend. Y'all, I'm telling him it's going to be okay. We're going to get through it. All the things. We come back. He claims he's called them on Monday. And he tells me that they said that they're not to come in, that the building's closed due to damage from the hurricane, to report the next day. Okay, that makes sense. We're in Tampa, hurricane. And downtown on the bay, they got more than we did in the outskirts in Riverview. So I go on to work. I teach on Tuesday. He goes to work. He comes right back home and he says, no, you can see the water line in the building. He's like, the doors are locked up tight. He's like, nobody's there. I can't get a hold of anybody. Then he's telling me over the next week or two, he's called corporate. LaVue has gone bankrupt. They've closed the Tampa office. They've eliminated his position. All these different things. I even straight up asked him to his face, Richard, did you get fired? No, why would you say that? I swear to you, I would tell you if I got fired. So, that still small voice. I go outside. He's like, what are you doing? I go, I got to get something out of the car. And I start digging through the car. And lo and behold, what do I find? COBRA paperwork. The COBRA insurance paperwork that they send you when you lose your job. I come in and I hold it up and I'm like, hey, did you get fired? He's like, no, why would you say that? I'm like, COBRA paperwork, you're busted. And he still tried to deny it. And he's like, call him and ask him. And that's the thing he would always do when he would get caught in a lie. He would say, oh, well, you can ask them. And I was like, well, they can't tell me anything. I said, but you need to come clean. And he eventually did and said, yes, I was fired. But of course, it wasn't his fault. He was doing his job. It was his boss's fault for not giving him access to the training program. It was, well, they hired me to do one thing and now they want me to do something else. So
they have an excuse for everything.
I know. I was like, oh, they hate being called out.
Oh, they
I'm
do.
Smarter than you.
And they're so fast. Like with excuses. Yeah. No, it's your fault. It's their fault. They didn't do this.
Go ahead and call them. They'll tell you. That's a classic. That is a red flag of all red flags. It's call. They'll tell you.
I know.
It is. And then my son and I, we get on Indeed, like while he's still denying it, before he comes clean. And I'm just looking. And lo and behold, his job in Tampa, LaVue, is posted on Indeed.
And then what does he have to say for himself?
I think that was actually when he came clean with, yes, I got fired.
Yeah, you have no choice.
There was nothing you could do. I'm like, they didn't go out of business. The company's open and running. They answered their phones. The 2.5 weeks after he got fired, before I found out, he pretended to go to work every day. Later admitted that he was sitting at the library.
Didn't Brandon do that?
Yeah. My ex-husband did that for 2 months.
Oh,
one time, 2 months, and another time, probably like a good 3-4 months. I'm like, where were you?
Desperate times calls for desperate measures. And this is when Lori knew that she needed to do whatever she could to financially take care of her family.
It was at this point that I actually had to pull all of my teacher retirement out because we could not afford to live in Tampa on a teacher's salary. But y'all, I was so supportive, when he was like, well, they went bankrupt. I'm like, okay, you can't help that, but you got to find a job. He goes back into the merchant card services. People are not buying from him in Florida. And he always had a story when he would come home from trying to sell these credit card things. It was always how they asked him if he was married. It was always how he would give them marriage advice. It was always how his wife was amazing, or they, hey, aren't you that ghost hunter guy? He was always trying to play his celebrity role.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for being a celebrity, how come he wasn't getting paid?
Right? Having only ever been married once for 27 years, my husband dying, I really don't know anything about divorce. We had only been married, a little over a year. I didn't want to leave him homeless in Tampa. I don't have the heart to leave anyone homeless. Well, I didn't. I might now. And that's just being quite honest. Everybody told me to leave him in Tampa. He wouldn't have had a phone. He wouldn't have had a car. Everything was in my name. Because right after we moved to Trenton, his car got repossessed. I was afraid to leave him in Tampa because he was 60. I was worried about getting charged with abandonment, elder abuse because he was 60. All these things ran through my mind because I do have anxiety and I am an overthinker. And so I was like, they're going to get me for abandonment. They're going to get me for elder abuse because he's not well. Because I had woke up one night and it looked like somebody had murdered the dog in my bathroom. There was so much blood from his legs, which we'll get to in a moment. I was like, I've got to take him to Georgia. I don't have a choice. Plus, he's going to sue me for palimony if I divorce him. And then I'm going to be supporting him the rest of his life. And I have no intention of doing that. So I thought, let me get to Georgia. Let me see how things go. I've got to get a plan to get out of this. We move, and he's really sick. Like, he couldn't help us pack in Tampa. He couldn't help load the U-Haul. He bumped his leg on something. Blood's running. A few nights before that, I had gotten up in the middle of the night. I have this irrational fear of snakes. I go in the all-white bathroom there in Tampa, and there's something like all lumped up, and I'm thinking, oh, dear God, there is a snake in this floor. And I reach around and flip the light on, and y'all, there was blood everywhere. I start yelling for him to turn on the bathroom light or the bedroom lights. There's blood all over the light gray carpet. And he says, oh, well, I guess this place on my leg ruptured. We need to go to the emergency room, y'all. It was so much blood. And the smell had been awful. Keep in mind, I had not seen his legs since he had moved to Tampa in June, maybe before that. So when I first met Richard, he had his right leg bandaged, and he was like, well, I was in this car wreck. A friend of mine was driving. The wreck was his fault. He didn't have any insurance. I don't have medical insurance. The dash exploded. It's like burns on my leg. Y'all, it was diabetic ulcers. He lied. Imagine that. Richard lied. I didn't know this at the time. He did tell me he was diabetic. I'd never seen diabetic ulcers in person, so I didn't know. He would say, well, I'm embarrassed. I don't want you to see my legs. And he wouldn't let me see them. And the one time that he went to the doctor with me, I remember him specifically telling me, don't you say a word about my legs. And it was very threatening not to say anything about his legs. So I didn't. It's not my place to tell. It's not your doctor. Whatever, big boy. It's on you. He keeps calling this same doctor, telling him that he has cellulitis, telling him that he has infection, and they just keep calling him in the same antibiotics. He was septic, and I knew he was septic because I had seen it. When my first husband got sick, I didn't know what sepsis was, but I recognized it immediately. So we had gotten moved in, and I told him, I'm like, we need to go to the emergency room. And he's like, no, I'm not going, because his stepdaughter was getting married the next day. And I was like, I cannot take the smell anymore. It makes me want to vomit. You are very sick. I'm pretty sure you're septic. We need to go to the ER. He's fighting on me. And I remember, y'all, I lost it. I was like, we can either go to the ER or you can flip and sleep outside in the cold because I can't stand this anymore. It burns my eyes. It's making me sick. And your daughter certainly does not want to smell that walking down the aisle. And she's not going to want her guests to smell that. Y'all, I was not nice. But I was afraid because he was very sick. And despite all of his lies, all of the untruths, I didn't want him to die. I didn't want him to lose his legs. So we go to the hospital. When they unwrap his legs, he tells them the whole car accident story, which by this time I knew was a lie. And I remember standing there and saying to the doctor, that's a lie. You need to tell the truth. And when they got it unwrapped, the doctor was even like nauseous. She had to leave the room. You could see the bone in his leg, his right heel, that was his left leg. His right heel was completely black. There was no skin on the bottom of the right leg. It was horrifying. And that led me to, when I got home in the wee hours, the very next day, I think it was, I called his great niece and said, hey, this is going on, and he may lose his legs, he may die. And when I called Danielle that night and said, hey, you're his only living relative since he never had any children, she said, yeah, he did. He has a daughter. And I said, no, those are his stepdaughters by this wife. And she's like, oh, no, that's so-and-so's daughter. I'm like, who's that? I don't know who that is. She's like, they were married. I'm like, no. He was married to Melissa. He was married to this one, and he dated this one. She's like, no, that's not the case.
Next time on Ex-Wives Undercover.
I start asking questions that I now know the truth to. He continues to boldface lie to my face. I'm like, well, if you had been able to have a kid, if you'd had a daughter, did you ever think about what you would have named her? And I remember him snapping his head around and looking at me and he says, what kind of game are you playing?
On one of these paranormal interviews, he states how he kind of fell into this mediumship career, and it was a call, and he was a New York police officer.
Richard Ruland is a former police officer from New York who migrated south. He's a staple in the paranormal community, having appeared on My Ghost Story, Aftershocks with Zach Bagans, and more.
Now, there's a lot of controversy surrounding that statement. I personally called the police department that he claims that he worked at. They have not heard of him ever.
He told me that he had responded to a domestic call, that a female was getting the living daylights beat out of her, and when he turned to face her, that she shot him in the hip with a shotgun. So while he was in the hospital, I intentionally looked and asked, hey, where's that scar from your gunshot wound? That's when all of the truths began to come out and the mask began to unravel.
And once again, if you like what you're hearing, please leave us a 5-star review and make sure to join our private Facebook group for even more juicy info. You can also find us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And of course, you can always visit our site at www.exwivesundercover.com.